Mortara case, from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, at en.wikipedia.org. The Mortara case was an Italian cause célèbre that captured the attention of much of Europe and the United States in the 1850s and 1860s. It concerned the Papal States' seizure from a Jewish family in Bologna of one of their children, 6-year-old Edgardo Mortara, on the basis of a one-time servant's testimony that she had administered emergency baptism to the boy when he fell sick as an infant. Mortara grew up as a Catholic under the protection of Pope Pius IX, who refused his parents' desperate pleas for his return, and eventually became a priest. The domestic and international outrage against the Pontifical State's actions may have contributed to its downfall amid the unification of Italy. In late 1857, Bologna's inquisitor, Father Pier Felletti, heard that Anna Morici, who had worked in the Mortara house for 6 years, had secretly baptized Edgardo when she thought he was about to die as a baby. The Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Roman and Universal Inquisition held that this made the child irrevocably a Catholic, and because the Papal States forbade the raising of Christians by members of other faiths, ordered that he be taken from his family and brought up by the Church. Police came to the Mortara home late on the 23rd of June, 1858, and removed Edgardo the following evening. After the child's father was allowed to visit him during August and September, two starkly different narratives emerged. One told of a boy who wanted to return to his family and the faith of his ancestors, while the other described a child who had learned the catechism perfectly and wanted his parents to become Christians as well. International protests mounted, but the Pope would not be moved. After pontifical rule in Bologna ended in 1859, Father Felletti was prosecuted for his role in Mortara's seizure, but acquitted when the court decided he had merely followed orders. With the Pope as a substitute father, Mortara trained for the priesthood in Rome until the Kingdom of Italy captured the city in 1870, ending the Papal States. Leaving the country, he was ordained in France at the age of 21, 3 years later. Father Mortara spent most of his life outside Italy and died in Belgium in 1940, aged 88. For many, the Vatican's actions encapsulated all that was wrong with the Papal States and exposed pontifical rule as an anachronism. Several historians highlight the affair as one of the most significant events of Pius IX's papacy, and juxtapose his handling of it in 1858 with the loss of most of his territory a year later. The case notably altered the policy of the French Emperor Napoleon III, who shifted from opposing the movement for Italian unification to actively supporting it. The traditional Italian historiography of unification does not give much prominence to the Mortara case, which by the late 20th century was remembered mostly by Jewish scholars. But a 1997 study by the historian David Kurtzer has marked the start of a re-examination. Section 1. Background. Subsection 1. Political context. For over a millennium, starting around 754, the Papal States were territories in Italy under the direct sovereign rule of the Pope. The Catholic Church's control over Rome and a neighboring swath of central Italy was generally seen as a manifestation of the Pope's secular temporal power as opposed to his ecclesiastical primacy. After the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, the other main Italian states were the Kingdom of Sardinia, governed from Piedmont on the mainland by King Victor Emmanuel II, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies in the south, and the Grand Duchy of Tuscany in the west. The French occupation during the 1790s had caused the Pope's popularity and spiritual authority to greatly increase, but had also severely damaged the geopolitical credibility of the Papal States. The historian David Kurtzer suggests that by the 1850s, what had once appeared so solid, a product of the divine order of things, now seemed terribly fragile. Pope Pius IX, elected in 1846, was initially seen as a great reformer and modernizer who might throw his weight behind the growing movement for Italian unification, referred to in Italian as the Risorgimento, meaning resurgence. When the revolutions of 1848 broke out, however, he refused to support a pan-Italian campaign against the Austrian Empire, which controlled Lombardy-Venetia in the northeast. This prompted a popular uprising in the Papal States. Pope Pius's fight to the Two Sicilies and the proclamation in 1849 of the short-lived Roman Republic, which was crushed by Austrian and French intervention in support of the Pope. Rome was thereafter guarded by French troops while Austrians garrisoned the rest of the Papal States, much to the resentment of most of the inhabitants. Pope Pius shared the traditional pontifical view that the Papal States were essential to his independence as head of the Catholic Church. He regained some of his popularity during the 1850s, but the drive for Italian unification spearheaded by the Kingdom of Sardinia continued to unsettle him. The Jews of the Papal States, numbering 15,000 or so in 1858, were grateful to Pope Pius IX because he had ended the long-standing legal obligation for them to attend sermons in church 4 times a year based on that week's Torah portion, and aimed at their conversion to Christianity, and had also torn down the gates of the Roman ghetto despite the objections of many Christians. However, Jews still lived under many restrictions, and the vast majority remained in the ghetto. Subsection 2. Mortara and Maurici. Edgardo Levi Mortara, the 6th of 8 children born to Salmone Momolo Mortara, a Jewish merchant, and his wife, Mariana, née Padovani, was born on the 27th of August 1851 in Bologna, one of the papal legations in the Pontifical States far north. The family had moved from the Duchy of Modena, just west of Bologna, in 1850. Bologna had its Jewish population of about 900 expelled by Pope Clement VIII in 1593. Some Jews, mostly merchants like Edgardo's father, had started to settle in Bologna again during the 1790s, and by 1858 there was a Jewish community of about 200 in the city. The Jews of Bologna practiced Judaism discreetly, with neither a rabbi nor a synagogue. The Papal States officially forbade them to have Christian servants, but observant Jewish families perceived Gentile maids as essential because they were not covered by Jewish laws, and thus provided a way for Jews to have household tasks carried out while still observing their Sabbath. In practice, church authorities turned a blind eye, and almost every Jewish family in Bologna employed at least one Catholic woman. A few months after Edgardo's birth, the Mortara family engaged a new servant, Anna Nina Maurici, an 18-year-old Catholic from the nearby village of San Giovanni in Persietto. Like all her family and friends, Maurici was illiterate. She had come to the city like her 3 sisters to work and save money towards a dowry so she could eventually marry. In early 1855, Maurici became pregnant, as was not uncommon for unmarried servants in Bologna at this time. Many employers would simply sack girls in such situations, but the Mortaras did not. They paid for Maurici to spend the last 4 months of her pregnancy at a midwife's home and deliver the child, then had her back. To protect Maurice and themselves from embarrassment, they told neighbors that their maid was sick and recuperating at home. Maurice gave her newborn baby to an orphanage, as the Papal States required unwed mothers to do, then returned to work with the Mortaras. She remained there until she was hired by another Bologna family in 1857. Soon after that, she married and moved back to San Giovanni in Peschiera. Section 2. Removal. Subsection 1. Instigation. In October 1857, the Inquisitor of Bologna, a Dominican friar called Father Pier Gaetano Felletti, learned of rumors to the effect that a secret baptism had been administered to one of the city's Jewish children by a Catholic servant. If true, this would make the child a Catholic in the eyes of the Church, a fact with secular as well as spiritual ramifications, since the Church stance was that children they considered to be Christians could not be raised by non-Christians and should be taken from their parents in such circumstances. Cases like this were not uncommon in 19th century Italy and often revolved around the baptism of a Jewish child by a Christian servant. The official Church position was that Catholics should not baptize Jewish children without the parents' consent, except if a child was on the brink of death. In these cases, the Church considered the customary deferment to parental authority to be outweighed by the importance of allowing the child's soul to be saved and go to heaven, and permitted baptism without the parents' assent. Many Jewish families feared clandestine baptisms by their Christian maids. To counter this perceived threat, some households required Christians leaving their employment to sign notarized statements confirming they had never baptized any of the children. The servant identified in the rumors was Anna Maurici. After receiving written permission to investigate from the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Roman and Universal Inquisition, also called the Holy Office, the body of cardinals responsible for overseeing and defending Catholic doctrine, Felletti interrogated her at the Basilica of San Domenico in Bologna. Maurici averred that while she was employed by the Mortaras, their infant son Edgardo had fallen gravely sick while in her care, leading her to fear he might die. She said that she had performed an emergency baptism herself, sprinkling some water on the boy's head and saying, quote, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost," end quote, but had never revealed this to the child's family. Edgardo had since recovered. Felletti had Maurici swear to keep the story quiet and sent a transcript of the meeting to Rome, requesting permission to remove the now 6-year-old Edgardo from his family. It is not known by historians whether Pope Pius IX was involved in any of the early Holy Office discussions over Mortara, or was otherwise aware of Felletti's initial investigation. He was its official head, but he only occasionally attended its meetings, and was not likely to be consulted about what the cardinals saw as routine matters. For the Holy Office, situations such as that reported by Felletti presented a profound quandary. On the one hand, the Church officially disapproved of forced conversions, but on the other it held that the baptismal sacrament was sacrosanct, and that if it had been properly administered, the recipient was therefore a member of the Christian communion. According to the laws of the Papal States, it was illegal to take a child from non-Christian parents for baptism, but if such a child was indeed baptized, the Church was held to bear responsibility to provide a Christian education. The cardinals considered Maurici's account and ultimately accepted it as bearing all the earmarks of the truth, without leaving the least doubt about the reality and the validity of the baptism she performed. Velletti was instructed to arrange Edgardo's removal and transport to the house of catechumens in Rome, where instruction was given to those newly converted or in the process of converting to Catholicism. Subsection 2. Seizure. A detail of Papal Carabinieri military police, led by Marshal Pietro Lucidi and Brigadier Giuseppe Agostini, arrived at the Mortara apartment in Bologna soon after sunset on the 23rd of June, 1858. After asking a few questions about the family, Lucidi announced, quote, "Signor Mortara, I am sorry to inform you that you are the victim of a betrayal," end quote, and explained that they were under orders from Father Velletti to take Edgardo as he had been baptized. Mariana screamed hysterically, ran to Edgardo's bed, and shrieked that they would have to kill her before taking him. Lucidi said repeatedly that he was only following Velletti's orders. He reported afterwards that he, quote, would have 1,000 times preferred to be exposed to much more serious dangers in performing my duties than to have to witness such a painful scene, end quote. Lucidi offered to let Edgardo's father accompany them to the Inquisitor to discuss the matter with him. Momolo refused, then allowed Momolo to send his eldest son, Riccardo, to summon relatives and neighbors. Mariana's uncle, Angelo Padovani, a prominent member of Bologna's Jewish community, concluded that their only hope was to appeal to Velletti. The Inquisitor received Padovani and Mariana's brother-in-law, Angelo Moscato, at San Domenico soon after 2300 hours. Velletti said that he, like Lucidi, was merely following orders. He declined to reveal why it was thought that Edgardo had been baptized, saying that this was confidential. When the men begged him to at least give the family one last day with Edgardo, the Inquisitor acquiesced on the condition that no attempt was made to spirit the child away. He gave Padovani a note to this effect to pass on to the marshal. Lucidi left, as ordered, leaving 2 men to stay in the Mortara's bedroom and watch over Edgardo. The Mortaras spend the morning of the 24th of June attempting to have Velletti's order overruled by either the city's cardinal legate, Giuseppe Milesi Peroni Ferretti, or the Archbishop of Bologna, Michele Biale Prela, but found that neither was in the city. Around noon, the Mortaras decided to take steps to make the separation as painless as possible. Edgardo's siblings were taken to visit relatives, while Mariana reluctantly agreed to spend the evening with the wife of Giuseppe Vita, a Jewish family friend. Around 1700 hours, Momolo visited San Domenico to make one last plea to Velletti. The Inquisitor repeated all he had said to Padovani and Moscato the previous night, and told Momolo not to worry, as Edgardo would be well cared for, under the protection of the Pope himself. He warned that it would benefit no one to make a scene when the Carabinieri returned that evening. Momolo came to find the apartment empty apart from Vita, Mariana's brother, also called Angelo Padovani, the 2 policemen, and Edgardo himself. At about 2000 hours, the Carabinieri arrived in 2 carriages, one for Lucidi and his men, and another in which Agostini would drive Edgardo. Lucidi entered the apartment and took Edgardo from his father's arms, prompting the 2 policemen who had guarded him to shed tears. Momolo followed the police down the stairs to the street, then fainted. Edgardo was passed to Agostini and driven away. Section 3. Appeal. Subsection 1. Initial appeal, Maurici confronted. With no way of knowing where the boy had been taken, Momolo found out only in early July. The Mortaras, supported by the Jewish communities in Bologna, Rome, and elsewhere in Italy, initially focused on drafting appeals and trying to rally support from Jews abroad. The greatly expanded public voice wielded by Jews in Western European communities following more recent moves towards freedom of the press, coupled with Jewish political emancipation in the Kingdom of Sardinia, Britain, France, and the United States, caused Mortara's removal to gain press attention far beyond anything previously given to such incidents. The papal government was initially disposed to simply ignore Momolo's appeals, but reconsidered after newspapers began reporting on the case. The Pontifical State's many detractors seized on the episode as an example of papal tyranny. Anxious to protect the Papal State's precarious diplomatic position, the Cardinal Secretary of State, Giacomo Antonelli, liaised with Rome's Jewish community to arrange a meeting with Momolo Mortara and received him politely in early August 1858. Antonelli promised that the matter would be referred to the Pope and granted Momolo's request that he be allowed to visit Edgardo regularly in the house of catechumens. Kurtzer cites Antonelli's concession of repeated visits, as opposed to the usual single meeting, as the first sign that the Mortara case would take on special significance. The attempts of the Mortaras and their allies to identify who was supposed to have baptized Edgardo quickly bore fruit. After their present servant Anna Facchini adamantly denied any involvement, they considered former employees and soon earmarked Maurici as a possible candidate. In late July 1858, the Mortara home was visited by Ginevra Scagliarni, a friend of Maurici's who had once worked for Mariana's brother-in-law, Cesare De Angelis. Mariana's brother, Angelo Padovani, tested Scagliarni by saying falsely that he had heard it was Maurici who had baptized Edgardo. The ruse worked. Scagliarni said that she had been told the same thing by Maurici's sister Monica. The younger Angelo Padovani went with De Angelis to confront Maurici in San Giovanni in Persietto. Padovani recalled finding her in tears. After the visitors assured her that they meant no harm, Maurici recounted what she had told Folletti. She said that a grocer named Cesare Lapori had suggested the baptism when she mentioned Edgardo's sickness, and shown her how to perform it. She had not mentioned it to anyone, she went on, until soon after Edgardo's brother Ariste died at the age of 1 in 1857, when a neighbor's servant called Regina proposed that Maurici should have baptized Aristide, that she had done so to Edgardo, quote, "slipped out of my mouth," end quote. According to Padovani, Maurici described crying to her interrogation by the inquisitor, and expressed guilt over Edgardo's removal, quote, "figuring that it was all my fault, I was very unhappy, and still am," end quote. Maurici agreed to have this formally recorded, but was gone when Padovani de Angelis returned after 3 hours with a notary and 2 witnesses. After searching for her in vain, they went back to Bologna with only their hearsay account of her story, which Padovani thought genuine. Quote, "Her words and her demeanor and her tears before she could launch into her story persuaded me that what she told me was all true." End quote. Subsection 2. 2 narratives. Edgardo was visited by his father several times under the supervision of the rector of the catechumens, Enrico Sara, from mid-August to mid-September 1858. The wildly divergent accounts of what happened during these encounters grew into two rival narratives of the entire case. Momolo's version of events, favored by the Jewish community and other backers, was that a family had been destroyed by the government's religious fanaticism, that helpless Edgardo had spent the journey to Rome crying for his parents, and that the boy wanted nothing more than to return home. The narrative favored by the Church and its supporters, and propagated in the Catholic press throughout Europe, was one of divinely ordained, soul-stirring redemption, and a child endowed with spiritual strength far beyond his years. The neophyte Edgardo had faced a life of error, followed by eternal damnation, but now stood to share in Christian salvation and was distraught that his parents would not convert with him. The central theme in almost all renditions of the narrative favoring the Mortara family was that of Mariana Mortara's health. From July 1858 onwards, it was reported across Europe that as a result of her grief, Edgardo's mother had practically, if not actually, gone insane and might even die. The powerful image of the heartbroken mother was stressed heavily in the family's appeals both to the public and to Edgardo himself. Momolo and the secretary of Rome's Jewish community, Sabatino Scaccioccio, told Edgardo that his mother's life was at risk if he did not come back soon. When Mariana wrote to her son in August, Scaccioccio refused to deliver the letter on the grounds that, being relatively calm and reassuring in tone, it might work against the impression they were trying to give him that she was no longer herself and that only his return could save her. One correspondent reported in January 1859, quote, "The father shows a great deal of courage, but the mother is having a hard time carrying on. If the Holy Father had seen this woman as I saw her, he would not have the courage to keep her son another moment." End quote. There were many different versions of the Catholic story, but all followed the same basic structure. All had Edgardo quickly and fervently embracing Christianity and trying to learn as much as possible about it. Most described a dramatic scene of Edgardo wondering at a painting of the Virgin Mary in sorrow, either in Rome or during the journey from Bologna. Agostini, the policeman who had escorted him to Rome, reported that the boy had at first stubbornly refused to enter a church with him for Mass, but displayed an apparently miraculous transformation when he did. A common theme was that Edgardo had become a kind of prodigy, according to an eyewitness account published in the Catholic L'Armonia della Religione con la Civiltà, that he had learned the catechism perfectly within a few days, blessed the servant who baptized him, and declared that he wanted to convert all Jews to Christianity. The most influential pro-church article on Mortara was an account published in the Jesuit periodical La Civiltà Cattolica in November 1858, and subsequently reprinted or quoted in Catholic papers across Europe. This story had the child begging the rector of the catechumens not to send him back, but to let him grow up in a Christian home, and initiated what became a central plank in the pro-church narrative, that Edgardo had a new family, namely the Catholic Church itself. The article quoted Edgardo as saying, quote, I am baptized and my father is the Pope," end quote. According to Kurtzer, the proponents of this pro-church narrative did not seem to realize that to many these accounts sounded too good to be true and absurd. Ketzer comments, quote, "If Edgardo in fact told his father he did not want to return with him, that he now regarded the Pope as his true father and wanted to devote his life to converting the Jews, this message seems not to have registered with Momolo." End quote. Liberals, Protestants, and Jews across the continent ridiculed the Catholic press reports. A booklet published in Brussels in 1859 outlined the two contrasting narratives, then concluded, quote, between the miracle of a 6-year-old apostle who wants to convert the Jews and the cry of a child who keeps asking for his mother and his little sisters, we don't hesitate for a moment, end quote. Mortara's parents furiously denounced the Catholic accounts as lies, but some of their supporters were less certain about where Edgardo's loyalties now lay. These included Scazzocchio, who had attended some of the disputing meetings at the catechumens. Subsection 3. Lepori's denial, Morisi discredited. Momolo returned to Bologna in late September 1858 after his two brothers-in-law wrote to him that if he stayed in Rome any longer the family might be ruined. He left Scazzocchio to represent the family's cause in Rome. Momolo shifted his priority to attempting to undermine Morisi's credibility, either by disproving aspects of her story or by showing her to be untrustworthy. He also resolved to confront Cesare Lepori, the grocer who Morisi said had both suggested the baptism and shown her how to perform it. Based on Morisi's story, Lepori had already been identified by many observers as being ultimately to blame for the affair. When Momolo visited his shop in early October, Lepori vehemently denied that he had ever spoken to Morisi about Edgardo or any baptism, and said that he was prepared to testify to this effect before any legal authority. He claimed that he did not himself know how to administer baptism, so had such a conversation occurred, it could hardly have gone as Morisi described. Carlo Maggi, a Catholic acquaintance of Momolo's, who was also a retired judge, sent a report of Lepori's refutation to Scazzocchio, who asked Antonelli to pass it on to the Pope. A cover letter attached to Maggi's statement described it as proof that Morisi's story was false. Scazzocchio also forwarded an affidavit from the Mortara family doctor, Pasquale Saragoni, who acknowledged that Edgardo had fallen sick when he was about a year old, but stated that he had never been in danger of dying, and that in any case Morisi had been herself bedridden at the time when she was supposed to have baptized the boy. A further report sent from Bologna in October 1858, comprising the statements of 8 women and 1 man, all Catholics, corroborated the doctor's claims about the sickness of Edgardo and Morisi, respectively, and alleged that the former maid was given to theft and sexual impropriety. 4 women, including the servant Anna Faccini, and the woman who had employed Morisi after she left the Mortaras, Elena Pignati, claimed that Morisi had regularly flirted with Austrian officers and invited them into her employers' homes for sex. Subsection 4. Alatri, then back to Rome. Momolo set out for Rome again on the 11th of October, 1858, this time bringing Mariana with him in the hopes that her presence might make a stronger impression on the church and Edgardo. Anxious about the possible consequences of a dramatic reunification between mother and son, the rector Enrico Sara took Edgardo from Rome to Alatri, his own hometown about 100 kilometers away. The Mortaras tracked them to a church in Alatri, where from the door Momolo saw a priest saying Mass, and Edgardo by his side assisting him. Momolo waited outside, and afterwards persuaded the rector to let him see his son. Before this meeting could take place, the Mortaras were arrested on the order of the mayor of Alatri, himself following a request from the town's bishop, and dispatched back to Rome. Antonelli was not impressed, thinking this an undignified line of action that would give obvious ammunition to the church's detractors, and ordered Sara to bring Edgardo back to the capital to meet his parents. Edgardo returned to the catechumens on the 22nd of October, and was visited by his parents often over the next month. As with Momolo's first round of visits, two different versions emerged of what happened. According to Edgardo's parents, the boy was obviously intimidated by the clergymen around him and threw himself into his mother's arms when he first saw her. Mariana later said, quote, "He had lost weight and had turned pale. His eyes were filled with terror. I told him that he was born a Jew like us, and he must always remain one. And he replied, 'Si, mia cara mama. I will never forget to say the Shema every day.'" End quote. One report in the Jewish press described the priests telling Edgardo's parents that God had chosen their son to be the apostle of Christianity to his family, dedicated to converting his parents and his siblings, and that they could have him back if they also became Christians. The clerics and nuns then knelt and prayed for the conversion of the Mortara household, prompting Edgardo's parents to leave in terror. The pro-church accounts, by contrast, described a boy very much resolved to stay where he was, and horrified by his mother's exhortations to return to the Judaism of his ancestors. In this narrative, the main reason for the Mortara's grief was not that their son had been taken, but that he now stood to grow up in the Christian faith. According to La Civiltà Cattolica, Mariana flew into a rage on seeing a medallion hanging from Edgardo's neck, bearing the image of the Virgin Mary, and ripped it off. One article went so far as to claim the Jewish mother had done this with the words, quote, "I'd rather see you dead than a Christian," end quote. Some of the church's critics had charged that by keeping Edgardo, it was violating the commandment that a child should honor his father and mother. La Civiltà Cattolica countered that Edgardo still loved his family despite their religious differences, and indeed, after being taught by the priests to read and write, had chosen to write his first letter to his mother, signing it, "Your most affectionate little son." Louis Voulot, the ultramontane editor of L'Univers newspaper, and one of the Pope's staunchest defenders, reported after meeting Edgardo in Rome that the boy had told him that he loves his father and his mother, and that he will go live with them when he is older, so he can speak to them of Saint Peter, of God, and of the Most Holy Mary. Section 4. Outrage. Subsection 1. International Scandal, Political Machinations. Having made no progress in Rome, Momolo and Mariana Mortara returned to Bologna in early December 1858, and soon afterwards moved to Turin in Piedmont. The case, an anti-Catholic publicist's dream, to quote Kurtzer, had by now become a massive controversy in both Europe and the United States, with voices across the political spectrum clamoring for the Pope to return Edgardo to his parents. Mortara became a cause célèbre, not only for Jews but for Protestant Christians as well, particularly in the United States, where anti-Catholic sentiment abounded. The New York Times published more than 20 articles on the case in December 1858 alone. In Britain, The Spectator presented the Mortara case as evidence that the Papal States had the worst government in the world, the most insolvent and the most arrogant, the cruelest and the meanest. The Catholic press, in both Italy and abroad, steadfastly defended the Pope's actions. The pro-church articles often took on an overtly anti-Semitic character, charging, for example, that if coverage in Britain, France, or Germany was critical, this was hardly a surprise, since currently the newspapers of Europe are in good part in the hands of the Jews. Scaccioccio suggested that the press storm attacking the church was actually counterproductive for the Mortara's family cause, as it angered the Pope and thereby steeled his resolve not to compromise. Regardless of whether Pope Pius IX had been personally involved in the decision to remove Mortara from his parents, whether he had been or not was debated extensively in the press. What is certain is that he was greatly surprised by the international furor that erupted over the matter, and promptly adopted the position that to return the baptized child to his non-Christian family would be totally incompatible with church doctrine. As foreign governments and the various branches of the Rothschild family, one by one, condemned his actions, Pius IX stood firm on what he saw as a matter of principle. Those angered included Emperor Napoleon III of France, who found the situation particularly vexing as the pontifical government owed its very existence to the French garrison in Rome. Napoleon III had indifferently supported the Pope's temporal rule because it enjoyed widespread support among French Catholics. The scandal over Mortara weakened this considerably, and according to the historian Roger Aubert, provided the final straw that changed French policy. In February 1859, Napoleon III concluded a secret pact with the Kingdom of Sardinia, pledging French military support for a campaign to drive the Austrians out and unify Italy. Most of the pontifical domain would be absorbed, along with the two Sicilies and other minor states. It was then an annual custom for the Pope to receive a delegation from Rome's Jewish community shortly after the New Year. The meeting on the 2nd of February 1859 quickly descended into a heated argument, with Pope Pius berating the Jewish visitors for stirring up a storm all over Europe about this Mortara case. When the delegation denied that the Jews of Rome had had any hand in the anti-clerical articles, the Pope dismissed Scaccioccio as inexperienced and foolish, then shouted, quote, "The newspapers can write all they want. I couldn't care less what the world thinks." End quote. The Pope then calmed down somewhat. Quote, "So strong is the pity I have for you that I pardon you. Indeed, I must pardon you." End quote. One of the delegates proposed that the Church should not give so much credence to Maurice's testimony, given her spurious morals. The Pope countered that regardless of her character, so far as he could see, the servant had no reason to invent such a story, and in any case Momolo Mortara should not have employed a Catholic in the first place. Pope Pius IX's determination to keep Edgardo developed into a strong paternal attachment. According to Edgardo's memoirs, the pontiff regularly spent time with him and played with him. The Pope would amuse the child by hiding him under his cassock and calling out, "Where's the boy?" At one of their meetings, Pope Pius told Edgardo, quote, "My son, you have cost me dearly, and I have suffered a great deal because of you." End quote. He then said to the others present, quote, "Both the powerful and the powerless tried to steal this boy from me and accused me of being barbarous and pitiless. They cried for his parents, but they failed to recognize that I, too, am his father." End quote. Subsection 2. Montefiore's Petition. Fall of Bologna. The Italian Jewish appeals brought the attention of Sir Moses Montefiore, the president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, whose willingness to travel great distances to help his co-religionists, as he had over the Damascus blood libel of 1840, for example, was already well known. From August to December 1858, he headed a special British committee on Mortara that relayed reports from Piedmont to British newspapers and Catholic clergymen, and happily noted the support expressed by British Protestants, particularly the Evangelical Alliance led by Sir Culling Eardley. After unsuccessfully attempting to have the British government lodge an official protest with the Vatican, Montefiore resolved to personally travel to Rome to present a petition to the Pope calling for Edgardo to be returned to his parents. He arrived in Rome on the 5th of April 1859. Montefiore failed to gain an audience with the Pope and was received by Cardinal Antonelli only on the 28th of April. Montefiore gave him the Board of Deputies petition to pass on to the Pope, and said that he would wait in the city a week for the pontiff's reply. 2 days later, news reached Rome that fighting had broken out between Austrian and Piedmontese troops in the north. The War of 1859 had begun. While most foreign dignitaries fled Rome as quickly as possible, Montefiore waited in vain for the Pope's response. He finally left on the 10th of May. On his return to Britain, more than 2,000 leading citizens, including 79 mayors and provosts, 27 peers, 22 Anglican bishops and archbishops, and 36 members of Parliament, signed a protest calling the Pope's conduct a dishonor to Christianity, repulsive to the instincts of humanity. Meanwhile, the Church quietly had Edgardo confirmed as a Catholic in a private chapel on the 13th of May, 1859. Edgardo was by this time no longer in the catechumens, but at San Pietro in Vincoli, a basilica elsewhere in Rome where Pope Pius had personally decided the boy would be educated. As the war turned against the Austrians, the garrison in Bologna left early in the morning on the 12th of June, 1859. By the end of the same day, the papal colors flying in the squares had been replaced with the Italian green, white, and red. The cardinal legate had left the city, and a group styling itself Bologna's provisional government had proclaimed its desire to join the Kingdom of Sardinia. Bologna was promptly incorporated as part of the province of Romagna. The Archbishop Michel Viale Prela attempted to persuade the citizenry not to cooperate with the new civil authorities, but had little success. One of the new order's first official acts was to introduce freedom of religion and make all citizens equal before the law. In November 1859, the governor Luigi Carlo Farini issued a proclamation abolishing the Inquisition. Section 5. Retribution. Subsection 1. Feletti arrested. Momolo Mortara spent late 1859 and January 1860 in Paris and London trying to rally support. While he was away, his father Simon, who lived about 30 kilometers west of Bologna in Reggio Emilia, successfully asked the new authorities in Romagna to launch an inquiry into the Mortara case. On the 31st of December 1859, Farini ordered his justice minister to pursue the authors of the kidnapping. Filippo Corletti, the new Director General of Police for Romagna, was put in charge of the investigation. After 2 officers identified the erstwhile inquisitor Feletti as having given the order to take Edgardo, Corletti and a detachment of police went to San Domenico and arrested him at about 0230 hours on the 2nd of January, 1860. The police inspectors questioned Feletti, but each time they asked about anything to do with Mortara or his removal, the monk said that a sacred oath precluded his discussing affairs of the Holy Office. When Corletti ordered him to hand over all files relating to the Mortara case, Feletti said that they had been burned. When asked when or how, he repeated that on Holy Office matters he could say nothing. Pressed further, Feletti said, "As far as the activities that I carried out as Inquisitor of the Holy Office of Bologna, I am obliged to explain myself to one forum only, to the supreme sacred congregation in Rome, whose prefect is His Holiness Pope Pius IX, and to no one else." After the police searched the convent for documents relating to the Mortara case, they found nothing. The inquisitor was escorted to prison. The news that Feletti had been arrested caused the press storm surrounding Mortara, which had died down somewhat, to flare up again across Europe.